Hello, I'm Bob Lima. Today we're presenting the fourth in a series of overviews about the Utica Power Authority, it's a water system that's been developed in Calaveras County. And our guest today is Dwayne Oneto, who is the chair of the UPA Board of Directors. Nice to see you this morning.
Nice to be here.
One of the issues that you and I have talked a little bit before taping today, and during that conversation I sort of expressed my ignorance about water issues in the county. And to bring me up to speed and also bringing the viewers up to speed, let's talk a little bit about kind of how the history of that watershed developed and also kind of what brought us to the point of having the UPA in existence.
How much time do we have?
How much tape do we have is the question.
Basically, the system started with the mining because Angels Creek dried up in the summertime and they needed water, so a system was developed to bring water from the North Fork through a series of flumes and canals, eventually to Hunter's Reservoir at Hathaway Pines, from Utica Union, Alpine. That whole system was developed to bring water to Angels, through Angels, Angels Creek and Angels, Murphy's Creek and Murphy's, the same system. Excuse me, the same system, but and when the mines closed in the 40s, there was big-time lawsuits, everybody involved, who's going to control the water, and eventually the offshoot came that PG&E in the middle 50s got a license for 40 years to run the system, and that's where we have been for the last 40 years. The license were to run out in 1995 and 96. When the PG&E licenses ran out in 95 for the lower system, 96 for the upper system, then it needed to go through a process to relicense, and PG&E applied for that license, applied to relicense the project. The Northern California Power Association, NCPA, filed a competing license, which complicated issues even further. And to shorten a very long and traumatic period here, eventually PG&E decided that what the federal government was asking them to do in the project was so much that it could not afford it operating with the Murphys or the Utica Powerhouse and the Angels Powerhouse. They were not going to be able to afford it, so they decided to sell the project. And Calaveras County, under the leadership of CCWD, submitted a bid for the project, and NCPA submitted a bid, and eventually, again, after everything was hassled and a lot of trauma went on, eventually a compromise was reached between CCWD and NCPA where they would split the project. NCPA taking the upper half roughly from Alpine to Hunters, and then the lower project would be taken over by UPA, the Utica Power Authority. Well, the Utica Power Authority came later. CCWD would take it over from Hunters to the Angels Powerhouse. And then CCWD decided to turn the running of this system over to a joint powers authority comprised of, it's a 6-member board that runs that, 2 from CCWD, 2 from the Union Public Utility District, UPUD, which is in Murphy's and which I'm a board member of, and the City of Angels.
So basically the long history in which a lot of articles and a lot of heat has been generated over the years to get sort of to this point, but basically the transformation was that's consolidated into 2 operating organizations, correct?
Yes.
So from Hunters on up to Spicer is NCPA operates it.
As well, and I keep talking about Alpine because that comes off the side, and it's they have a NCPA has always controlled Spicer out of the North Fork project. And the difference, or what has occurred here now, is that they are taking over the reservoirs that PG&E operated and adding to their source of water.
Yeah. And then basically from Hunters on down to Angels Creek, when it finally flows into Maloney's, is the UPA, right?
Right, except our authority and everything stops at the Angels Powerhouse, so that the system below the Angels Powerhouse is not controlled by indirectly, because we put the water there, but we have no say after the water leaves the Angels Powerhouse.
Okay. So the last time I believe that community television did a report on the UPA was just at the point where you were making a presentation before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. And one of the things that when I was talking about doing this with some friends the last few days was there are so many acronyms for all this stuff. And somebody on the inside, when they start talking about FERC, I mean, my initial take on FERC was, well, it's obviously FERC Smith or something. You know, it's like, you know, FERC. But FERC is the agency to which all jurisdictions must apply in order to receive permission to operate?
Yes, if you are going to generate power using water in the United States, then you need to have, well, I'm sure that there's a restriction if you were doing, you know, your own backyard for your own use in a little creek, but if you intend to sell power, then you need to obtain a license from FERC in order to use the water for that purpose.
And all the way along when a project is being developed, there are points at which the power generation district has to appear before FERC to get a further licensing or a further approval of their operations plan, is that
Yes. And of course, as environmentally speaking, it has become tougher and tougher as time has gone on to, you know, the FERC staff is very concerned about making sure that you meet everybody's needs, you know, you're keeping enough water for fish and this type of thing.
Yeah, and that's what I mentioned. It seemed to me that one of the real people on your board and other boards have a Supreme Juggling Act in a way to be able to satisfy the needs, requirements, desires, and mandates that you have as a power generation authority to be able to meet all those requirements. And that's that threading the needle that everybody has to do in every jurisdiction. And in a way, it's unique, more unique here because Calaveras is one of the few counties in California which provides the water, where it's the source of water, not just the usage, the source. And I think that's another issue that everyone in the foothills ends up dealing with that other jurisdictions really don't. They get their water from someplace else.
And it's one of the reasons behind the effort that has been made here was to keep this water for Calaveras County, because had this compromise not been reached and had NCPA been able to control the total amount of water that PG&E used to control, it would be reduced by about 60 to 70% of the water would not be coming down this side. When I say this side, I'm referring to Hunters through Murphy's Creek. Otherwise, it would simply go through the tunnel and make power in Collierville. And of course, one of the concerns early on was what was the best way to go about this. Should we battle NCPA to the death for all the 78 CSF that PG&E was entitled to, or should we come out with some kind of compromise? And again, after much soul searching, and certainly it was not my decision, it was CCWD's decision, that what we should do, mainly under the leadership of Dennis Dooley, what we should do is come to some kind of a compromise agreement so we would be sure that we would save at least as much of the water as we could rather than risking losing all of it.
Now, the agreement, we're going to be talking about the agreement in a second in terms of what the specifics are about the flow rate and stuff like that. But this agreement, when it was proposed and worked through, for FERC, there are agencies or entities called interveners, which came up in our conversation a couple of days ago, which I had never heard the concept of the interveners. It's kind of like a 1970s TV show or something, you know. But the interveners are all those agencies and individuals and whatever jurisdictions can come in and say no or yes to the project. Correct?
Not so much as that. And I don't know that it's yes or no. It's a matter of them saying, I have concerns here. I want inform me and let me know what's happening. And then, yes, if these interveners do not agree with what you're doing, then they can say, wait, and they can protest to FERC.
Right. So then the nature of the plan might be changed in consideration of the objections or the issues that these interveners bring up.
Right.
Now, a year ago, after the presentation was made to FERC, the agreement that you had with NCPA, there were a dozen interveners involved in that.
That's
and
correct.
11 out of the 12 interveners approved of the project.
Right.
And
approved the compromise proposal that we have before FERC.
Right.
Yeah.
And those interveners include people like the City of Angels, the county, and
obviously, three of them are running
Right.
City of Angels, Union Public Utility District, and Murphy's, CCWD, Calaveras County Board of Supervisors, the Calaveras County Fish and Game, Department of Fish and Game, water quality, and there are various other governmental agencies who are concerned with the creek. And 11, we have everybody on board except one, which is the Concerned Citizens for the Concerned Citizens of Calaveras County for the preservation of Angel Creek for CPAC.
Right, and that's still continuing discussion with those folks. The specifics of the agreement and the compromise that was worked out prior to UPA having this compromise agreement, what was the flow rates and all that sort of stuff?
Before, well, we have to go back to the North Fork project. Before the North Fork project, PG&E's water came through a system of flumes and canals, very expensive to maintain. When the North Fork project went in, and I'm assuming that everybody knows that that's New Spicers, the tunnel under big trees that runs Collierville. When that went in, NCPA worked out an agreement with PG&E where they could abandon all of those upper flumes and everything and take the water out of the tunnel as it goes to Collierville. And PG&E agreed to that. And then the question became how much water. PG&E was entitled to 88 cubic feet per second through the old system. And that's in an average year. Drought years, that drops, but 88. However, because in the summertime there was never enough water running down here, they very seldom ever had 88. Obviously in the wintertime you ran 88 all the time, but in the summertime it was much less than that. So before anybody here was involved in this relicensing process, NCPA and PG&E worked out an agreement that they would deliver 78 cubic feet per second at the tunnel tap, which is just by Hunter's Reservoir and fills Hunter's Reservoir. When the agreement took place between CCWD and NCPA, obviously, if PG&E could not afford this whole system on these two powerhouses, Collierville is a much bigger powerhouse, can produce much more power. Therefore, they could afford to do more with up there in that area and make more money because they're running it through Collierville. Therefore, what it was decided, and it was based strictly, as far as I can determine now, looking at it from hindsight, pretty much on how much who can afford what. And it was decided that if they gave 28 CSF to NCPA to run through Collierville, that would pay for their half up there, and the other roughly 2/3 of the water, the other 50 CSF would come down this side, go through Utica and Angels powerhouses, and then that would pay off the project for down here.
So what ended up happening, though, kind of the bottom line of the cubic feet per second is that the UPA achieved double the flow rate from the project as before.
Well, I think what we need, if you talk about NCPA's proposal, if they got the license, they were going to leave about 25 CSF coming this side, 30 depending on how much UPUD and the City of Angels used, but it was about 30. Under this compromise agreement, we are now getting 60% of the water that we would ordinarily have not gotten had NCPA gotten a contract. But remember that PG&E originally was bringing all 78 this way, and in order to pay for the project, giving the 28 CSF to NCPA in the compromise agreement now cuts the flows coming down this side down to 50, and that figure varies. When it was worked out, it was decided that Calaveras County would need the heaviest flows in the summertime for irrigation and that type of thing, so that the flows vary anywhere from 51 down to about 45, 42 in the wintertime.
So,
now, the thing that the confusion comes when you talk about what PG&E had originally, and in order to afford this project, what we have to do is we have to bring in NCPA and we have to give them some water to get them to give up their contract, and now that reduces the total flow from the PG&E original contract, but is more than would be there if NCPA had gotten the license. I don't know if that...
There's three scenarios. One is the original PG&E scenario. The second is the NCPA proposal if they had the whole system. The third, which is the way it is now, is the split of the system between UPA and NCPA. And you mentioned a figure that you believe that NCPA is going to have to fund the system of, what you said, $3 to $5 million to meet the mandates to operate that portion of the system.
The figures that PG&E were given, or that they were publicizing or telling us when we were talking about this, and when they said we can't afford this, is they were talking about $3 million for recreational, building roads, getting access into Utica Union, and doing work at Alpine, and just improving the area that was required by the United States Parks Department, Fish and Recreation, and that type of thing. Now, whether NCPA is going to have that same $3 million expense or it's going to be less than that, I don't, it's hard for me to tell, but that's the figure that PG&E was using.
And that's one of the other obligations that is involved in any in this particular FERC licensing, is that mandate to satisfy the recreational use and the environmental use and the power generation use and the residential commercial service use of the water that comes through any one of these.
Don't forget irrigation.
I'm sorry.
Yes, it is. It is very complicated, and there are, we call it multiple use, and what you're trying to do as a director is to meet as many of those needs as you can.
Also, now, one of the things, obviously, that each one of the entities involved in this, both for NCPA and also UPA, is you're both intending to try to make some money out of this. There is a profit that you want to be able to generate to maintain the system, and in UPA's case, because CCWD provided a $2 million loan to UPA to be able to make the payments back on that loan. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about how the power cost was derived, and also how you're doing in terms of the financial resources that you're.
Well, I have never thought of this as profit. This, from my viewpoint, is let's save as much water as we can for Calaveras County. So I am perfectly happy with a break even. And yes, in order to put this project together, it took $3.7 million. $1.7 million was from a bank in Chicago, LaSalle Bank, loaned us the money. The other $2 million came from CCWD in the form of two loans. One for 10 years interest-free was $1 million. I'm sorry, $1 million, 5 years interest-free, and another $1 million, 10 years interest-free. And it was the goal when we set this up that UPA would be able to pay those loans back before the period ran out. We are now 2.5 years in. The project, we have all of, we've been making our payments to LaSalle Bank, and we have managed to amass in reserves of $700,000 right now. And of course, UPA operates on $150,000 bank account that we keep for our O&M, and then we have a $400,000 reserve that we want to set aside in case we have problems with powerhouses, in case flumes wash out or whatever. And then we have roughly $179,000 payment a year to LaSalle Bank. And our agreement with CCWD is that when we amass $759,000 for these things that I have mentioned, in June, if we have anything left over, then that's when we start paying back CCWD. And we're hoping that we will be able to make our first payment this June. We're hoping we're going to be close enough, and if it, God willing, and it keeps raining.
And if the creek does rise.
Yes. Keep those creeks rising, boy. And as long as that happens, then yes, we will be able to, we're hoping that we'll be able to get some of that money back to CCWD this June.
Now, I remember I was involved in the county years ago and on different water committees and stuff, and it really seems like the UPA has streamlined and brought together some different jurisdictions into one, which it seems to be functioning very well.
Well, I don't know if I would. We are functioning.
I know.
Certainly not without dispute and
yes.
And a lot of discussion and that type of thing. But yes, it's been very interesting watching the three organizations trying to come through.
The difference, though, between, to me as a resident of the county, the difference between how those discussions go and how the decisions are reached is the difference between having those discussions in public and having those discussions behind some private entity's closed doors.
Okay.
And that information, I mean, for any public agency these days that does deal in water or any natural resource, the exposure you have to people that want to modify your positions, that have public input, that have maintained consistency over the years in certain positions, it's one more layer of responsibility that public agencies have. And, you know, I as a citizen admire that. The courage you have as board members to go and do this. It's an adventure.
It can get interesting, yes.
It's a real adventure. But, you know, years ago, one of the things about the water in the county, and you mentioned on a little bit, was that the prerogative of local jurisdictions to claim water rights over water that originates or passes through their county isn't something that does not go undisputed. And by valley users, if you could talk a little bit about that, that's one of the things about the whole nature and the whole movement to consolidate and also to designate water usage in this county so that it doesn't go out to another user. And then once it goes out there and it's used by another jurisdiction, it's gone.
Well, I don't think that it's any secret that in the western United States, with the climate as it is, that water is the key. Whether you are Los Angeles and you dry up Mono Lake, right, or wherever, you simply need the water. And what has gradually happened as population has grown, there is less and less free water available. And, you know, it's been very nice for the people along Murphy's and Angels Creek when PG&E's powerhouses did not use all the water, all that 78. It simply got turned down for, you know, it was just basically run into Maloney's, old or new, with, you know, because nobody could do anything with it. And what is happening now is that the demand for water, as it gets greater and greater, the demand for water is there's no longer this free amount that you can just sort of let trickle away. It's becoming a matter of each drop is going to be battled for, and I don't think that we have seen anything like it's going to get in the future. I mean, you know, there are always plans afoot to divert water through the peripheral canal, or do this or do that, or bring water from Utica and Humboldt County down through Clear Lake, Cache Creek, and so that they can put it in the peripheral canal and send it to Southern California. Yeah. And it's not going to get any easier. It's only going to get worse. And I think you're well aware of being on a county planning water board, that one of the things that you have to do is you have to use the water to be able to keep it. If you are not using the water, and Calaveras County has lots of water rights that we are not using at the present time, I think you would agree with that. If we don't find some use for that water, then it may very well be the state can come in and say, you're not using it, we need it someplace else, we'll take it. So what you're stuck with is you are the county of origin, and you want to keep the water, but in order to keep the water, you got to use it, but it's pretty tough unless you can find somebody like John Couch who's willing to come in and invest huge sums of money to build vineyard, and you got to find some place to use it. So, but at the same time, you don't want to lose water that you've had, that you've been using, which we can do with this resource here. And already, just with our program, we've managed to lose a third of it just in order to save 2/3 of it. And and so I don't know. Your question is quite true that water is probably the next great battleground in the United States. I mean, at one time it was over land, but I think it's water now, without a doubt.
The other real irony that water involves that land doesn't necessarily is that it's a natural resource that varies from year to year.
Very much
and
so.
that puts a whole different spin on it, because once you obligate yourself to supply somebody else with water or obligate yourself to furnish it, the thing that I'm sure that everybody's worked through in the agreements you have is the scenario of 8 years ago or 5 years ago as opposed to the last 2 years, and also opposed to what's going on outside right now as we're taping this.
Or what's happening 20 years from now when you're trying to put a program together that somehow is going to meet the needs, and the assumption is that we will get a 30-year license because that's the minimum they give. It's possible we could get it for 40. They give 30, 40, and 50, but since we are not building anything, usually those are 30-year projects. So what you're trying to do, or 30-year license, what you're trying to do right now is you're trying to figure out how can I develop a program here that's not going to tie my hands 25 years from now when I have something else that I want to do. And it's very difficult to guess what's going to happen, and my philosophy has been let's just keep it as flexible as possible. And of course, people who have other concerns don't want it as flexible as possible because they're assuming that for whatever reason the UPA is not going to function in the best interest of everybody or anything, so people want to write it in the license, boy, this water's got to go here, this water's got to go there, we got this, and of course, UPA is saying, wait a minute, we may get somewhere down the road where we may want to do the whole county. Maybe everybody will want to do something different. So let's keep the agreement as flexible as possible. And of course, it becomes a real battleground.
And it's that public policy issue. I think that probably no other or very little other discussions are as heated or as deeply felt. And I think all the parties involved in different perspectives do feel the same commitment to their own positions. But what comes out of that is that system has to serve all those parties.
Yeah, I have no problem with 4 CPAC and what they want. I would dearly love to be able to run 10, 15 CSF right where they want to do it. I would have no problem with that. I would dearly love to pay CCWD back their money immediately. Unfortunately, we have to make CCWD happy, and we have to try and make 4 CPAC happy as to where we are and how we're going to delegate the water. And I think our compromise proposal does that. It has the one great, what I think is a great thing about a good compromise is nobody's happy. You've got people on one side yelling at you and people on the other side yelling at you and that type of thing. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's a good compromise. And again, FERC can modify it. FERC can do anything that they would. Correct what they see are injustices that the UPA has done to them.
No, the next milestone, though, in this process is going to be the submission of the environmental reports, right? Is
the
that
staff by FERC. What FERC has done so far now is they have accepted our compromise proposal. They have paid a visit and were here last July and met both in Angels and in Alpine up at Bear Valley to discuss the ramifications of the project and took public comment. And the basic situation was, as we have already outlined, is that 11 of the 12 interveners had no comment at the scope meeting. It was the scoping meeting. It was only for CPAC who made a presentation. And right now, FERC took all that information, went back to Washington, submitted to us more questions, more information that we have to collect from those comments, and we have completed all but one, which is a cultural aspect with the Miwok Indians, and we are presently working with the Miwok representatives in Tuolumne County to come up with a program that will meet their needs. And basically, all this goes back to FERC, and we are hoping that we will get some kind of recommendation out of the FERC staff to the FERC general licensing body by 2000, and we're hoping that the FERC licensing body will take action hopefully by 2001. But at one time we thought we were going to all get this done in 98, and obviously we could only get the scoping meeting done. So it's very difficult to tell when this whole thing will finally materialize.
But each one of these evolutions or stages of the process usually takes between 18 months and 2 years for the input, and then the response, and then the final clarification, and then then you take one more step.
Yep.
Because what everybody does is you're supporting Washington bureaucracies along the way as they.
Well, but in this one, you know, the very frustrating thing about this, being involved in this project, is when we bought it from PG&E, everybody said, wait, we have a public agency buying a private power corporation or buying some, thing. That's never happened before. What's going on here, So you go through all that while everybody says, this never happened before. Then we go to FERC, and FERC says, now wait a minute, we have 2 competing licenses, and we were going to handle with that. Now what you've done is you've submitted one here, a compromise proposal with 2 agencies splitting up, one that you have, this has never happened before, and you keep running into this of everybody saying, this has never happened before, and somehow the precedent-breaking idea of it is somehow shattering, that they just go, wait, we need to think about this some more, and you just keep running into it everywhere on this project. And we're operating now and have been since '95 on just temporary yearly license, because FERC can't very well shut the project down and dry up Angels Camp and Murphy's and that type of thing. So you operate on a year-to-year basis, and hopefully we'll eventually get something done here.
Now, if someone who's listening today, or watching today, they could be listening too. They could be away from the TV set, just kind of, could be listening. Wants to find out more about UPA and also the water issues in the county and the history of the groups and stuff. Can they contact the UPA office?
Yes, the UPA office is here in San Andres. I don't have a phone number for you, but I will give you my phone number, and I will be more than happy to give that information when I have it. And so it's Dwayne Onito at 736-4281. And Dennis Dickman, our office manager, they can call in there. And we do not, because we're not really a retail organization, our office hours are not what I would say regular office hours, but just call, leave a message on the answering machine, and we'll get back to anybody on that.
Well, I think we'll be having another report soon, maybe next year. Report number 5. I want to thank everybody for watching today. I want to thank you, Dwayne, for being here. And this is Bob Lima saying thanks for watching. And